throw. One-on-one. Davis has it. Touchdown. Carolina wins. Carolina is the Coastal Division champion. Javonte Williams to the left of Howell. He'll send him out into the flat right side. Howell looking, standing tall, lets it go. Man there. Touchdown. Touchdown, Carolina. The pistol. Jackson behind him. Hands off to Jackson. He tried a jump pass, and it's intercepted. Surratt interception. Holy cow, Carolina's going to win. And off to Javonte Williams again. Pops it to the left. Javonte leaps over a man, crosses the 50, trucks over a defender, spins by another. Goodness gracious, he's down to about the 15, and he did absolutely everything in one carry.
Here's the shotgun snap to Aguilar. Drops back. Pressure coming. Aguilar floats it up. Incomplete. No flags. Head on back up the mountain. Carolina wins it in double overtime. Loftus out of the shotgun. Throws to the end zone. Incomplete. Incomplete. The bell belongs to us. Carolina wins it. 47-45 in double overtime.
Bernard fields it at the 26. Heading to the far side. Gio at the 35. Gio, he's at the 50. No, he's not. Yes, he is. Gio is going to take it for a touchdown. Are you kidding me?
What's going on, guys? Welcome into another edition of the Heel Tough Blog Podcast. It's your host, Anthony Pagnotta, here with you guys on a Tuesday night during one of the most insane periods of Carolina football today. An absolutely crazy day when it comes to the transfer portal. There are rumors that are floating around about the coaching search, all sorts of stuff. And oh, by the way, we have to talk about Carolina's loss to the NC State Wolfpack, their fourth straight loss to the Wolfpack, and that's how Carolina closes the season. Bowl projections, I got to be honest, I haven't even looked at them just yet, but Carolina is still going to a bowl game, so plenty of stuff that we will be talking about here throughout the night. And then you'll also have a little bit of news on the recruiting trail, a very significant piece of news on the recruiting trail. So there's a whole bunch of stuff that we have to get into, but let's start with the game against NC State. The reason that we were doing the podcast here to begin with, and then all this other stuff kind of piled on top of it. The third year out of the last four where NC State pretty much just rips Carolina's heart out. Carolina led three different times in the second half of this game. And then, of course, the final drive where NC State drives down, scores the game-winning touchdown. It's a throw over the shoulder to Noah Rogers, who had done absolutely nothing the entire night. He hauls in a 44-yard catch on a perfect throw by quarterback C.J. Bailey in between cornerback Marcus Allen and safety Will Hardy, and NC State finds a way to pull off another victory in this one. Then we get to the part that everybody wants to talk about, which is the fight that happens after the game. NC State brings out their flag. I believe it said 1 pack, 1 goal, some stupid crap like that, and decides they want to try to plant it at midfield. Now, remember that NC State did this a couple of years ago, but what they did was they waited until Carolina was off the field. This time, they try to do it as the team is shaking hands. J.J. Jones comes in, rips the flag away from him, and proceeds to attempt to throw it into the stands. After that, he gets into a shoving match with a couple of guys along the sideline. Meanwhile, back towards the middle of the field, you have a whole group of guys just pushing and shoving. Looked like a lot of linemen in there and everything like that. Both teams find the maximum amount by the ACC, which is $25,000 for the incident. And the matter at this point is seen as closed, which means there will not be any suspensions handed down because of it. So, long story short, kind of ran through the most important part right there. What did you make of this fight, Josh Marlowe? What do you think about everything that went down. It wasn't the only one of these types of fights that we saw on Saturday. It actually became rather commonplace for these fights here on Rivalry Week around the country.
Yeah, it's disappointing, and not just because it's NC State. It was in every game that you saw this. It felt like it happened where these teams were trying to plant their flags and on turf, which is not going to work, and then just causing all these unnecessary melees where something could have seriously gone wrong, and someone could have seriously gotten injured. I just, and this isn't just with NC State. I don't get why winning isn't enough. I don't know why it's so hard for this generation of athlete to win with class and win with grace, because that should be enough. You should be able to do whatever you got to do in the 60 minutes to win the game, and that be that. You shake your opponent's hands, you walk off the field, you go celebrate. But that's not where we are. That's not where college football is at right now. And it's unfortunate because this overshadowed a great weekend of college football. It overshadowed a great rivalry weekend of college football. And to be clear, there's a difference. And we've had conversations about court storming and about what needs to be done in that regard. But court storming has always been a part of college basketball. That's always been a part of a fan base celebrating usually a massive upset. It's kind of changed over the years where teams will, just because they know they're going to the tournament or something, they'll rush the floor or whatever. And they need to do a better job of protecting players in that instance as well. But it's different when you're still trying to shake hands and you know that that's going to cause a scene. And so, as equally disappointed as I could be in NC State, it was in every incident across the country because it's just unnecessary. And at some point, winning should be the only thing that matters, not how you celebrate the win.
Yeah, I mean, it's I think classless is probably the best way to state it. Which, I mean, when it comes to the program that was on the other side, it shouldn't really shock you. I mean, they had a guy that took Kamen Rucker out earlier in the game, and you could say whatever you want about whether or not that's a legal play or not. It doesn't matter. When you're seen smiling on camera after you severely injure somebody, I mean, it just kind of says everything that you need to know about how the program's run. It's run by a scumbag. And we've known that. We've known that for years, but especially the last 2 years, it's really shown you what it is. And I'm going to be honest with you. I think that, if people would say to me, well, if Carolina won, you'd want to do the same thing on NC State's field. Not really, because I think that they are beneath us and it's not even worth celebrating. Honestly, we have bigger goals than beating NC State every year. Their coach admitted in the postgame that's the only goal that his team has every single year. And it kind of shows because that was the mindset that they took the entire season. For me, I think it's ridiculous. I don't really understand. I mean, first of all, it started with a flag planting in a game that's not even a rivalry. Baker Mayfield is a guy that decided to start this trend. He defended the trend earlier this week, which I would counter with you're listening to a guy that at one point got suspended, or I believe he was suspended or he did not start a game because he decided to grab his man region towards the Kansas Jayhawks sideline. Keep in mind, this was the Kansas Jayhawk team that was like 1-9. This wasn't very good Kansas like we've seen the last few years. So, I mean, I don't really understand it. I think, honestly, you saw in the Ohio State-Michigan game why it probably should be outlawed because you had players get pepper sprayed, which, something like that. Look, they were the ones that were fighting. It's hard to really feel sorry for a lot of those guys. It's when you've got multiple reporters who have to get sprayed in the eyes and stuff like that. with pepper spray where it just becomes ridiculous. Like at some point, you got to realize that if you're going to do that, there's going to be a response from the other team. And I know a lot of people wanted to, including people in Carolina's fan base, wanted to call out the Tar Heels for fighting back. Well, you should have fought during the game. Well, I mean, some of those kids actually left it all out on the field. There were other ones that maybe didn't, but I mean, who is it for us to judge who actually put all their effort on the field and who didn't? If they're going to disrespect the logo, shouldn't you want guys that want to defend the logo? We complain about players in this era only being for themselves and only worried about the name on the back of the jersey, not the name on the front of the jersey. Well, then they defend the name on the front of the jersey, and now we're complaining and saying it's a pathetic look for Carolina football. I don't really know. To me, this one was a lot different than people were trying to compare it to what happened at the end of Larry Fedora's era. I do think it is kind of ironic that it was a fight at the end of the Larry Fedora era that, pretty much ended his tenure, signifying that it was over. And same thing with Mack Brown. But, to me, it's unnecessary. It's something that they should look to get out of the game. And I think, for people that are complaining and saying it's a horrible look for Carolina, and it shows that these players are undisciplined or whatever. I mean, yeah, maybe that's what it seems, but I don't know. I mean, to me, and I'd like to hear what you think about this. I think a lot of the people that were saying that and pointing that out, almost every one of them was pointing to Mack Brown. And it was really just them using it as an emphasis to kind of pile on Mack Brown more than saying that it was the players being irresponsible. It was really just more of them saying this shows that Mack Brown doesn't have the right leadership skills, which I thought was just unnecessary to keep piling on him, especially with everything that he had to deal with in the last week.
Well, I mean, I think in his defense, when he said in his post game, which was wild for many different reasons, that he said he didn't know what started it, he wasn't lying. Him and Dave Doran were in a pretty lengthy post game conversation, saying goodbye as rivals. This wasn't Ryan Day, who was literally on the field watching his players get pepper sprayed, and asked Jack Sawyer what happened while Jack Sawyer was dropping the F-bomb on multiple different videos when talking about Michigan planting the flag on their turf. So night and day situations. I can sit here and applaud our guys for going to stop them from trying to take the flag out of the turf. The best way to defend your logo is to win. And Carolina did not do that, which allowed State to feel the way that they felt to go and plant the flag. And I think the bigger issue is not that they necessarily did it, because they did it when they won in our building 2 years ago. It's that they did it with everyone on the field and everyone still in the stadium.
Yeah.
That's the difference. If this would have happened after the field clears and the stands have emptied, no harm, no foul. Really nothing you can do at that point. But when everyone's still on the field and there's 57,000 people in the stands, you're just asking for more trouble. You're asking for some drunk to start throwing stuff or, spitting on players or something like that. So it's why it does not have a place in the game. And so, that's why you saw the fines come down from the ACC. You saw bigger fines in the Big Ten and in the SEC. And this will be something that I don't think we'll be talking about this time next year, because I think it'll be eradicated from the sport.
I mean, somebody brought up a great point. Look at how quickly they got rid of the Kenny Pickett slide. This is something that actually brings the health of not only players, but coaches and support staff, reporters, photographers, all that kind of stuff. It brings them sort of into the mix. And so I think, there's no way that you can't actually outlaw this. And moving forward, hopefully it will not be something that anyone can do. And again, that includes Carolina. Like, I don't think that's something that we should do. They don't do it in any other sport. You don't see guys go to mid-court after they win in an opposing venue and stomp all over the court and try to degrade. That doesn't happen. So, to me, I mean, look, if you want it this way, you don't have to shake hands after the game. You could literally just walk off the field. And I really wouldn't care if that's the way that it has to be. I don't think the ACC would like it, but I think that, if that's what it takes to calm these kind of things from happening, then that's what you should end up doing. All right, quickly, let's talk about the game because we got so much stuff that we have to get into. We're not going to spend a ton of time on what actually happened in the game because really it's pretty simple what happened to Carolina. I think the first thing that you have to talk about when it comes to this game is the polar opposites that Carolina was on defense in the first half and the second half. This game, honestly, from a defensive standpoint, take away the fact of what the scoreboard looked like. This was pretty much a repeat of Carolina's game against Duke from earlier in the year because in the first half, they allowed just 89 yards and 7 points. They did a great job containing the run game for NC State. CJ Bailey wasn't able to get comfortable. Carolina did everything that they needed to do. They even forced a turnover. Marcus Allen comes away with an interception. In the second half of this game, Carolina allows 373 yards of total offense and 28 points. They did not stop any of the 6 drives that NC State had in the second half. That run defense that was so good in the first half was non-existent. Offensive line was getting pushed around, and CJ Bailey absolutely carved up a secondary that once again, when Carolina needed them the most, they started to struggle. Clearly, I think the impact of losing a guy like Kamen Rucker was seen once again because that looked a lot like the defensive line, especially rushing the passer that we saw when he was out of the lineup. But this is, a thing that we saw so often under Mac Brown, and it felt like it came back here for Carolina that when the defense needed to get a stop in that second half, they simply could not do it.
No, but it was the name of the game, and it's been the name of this program for a decade plus, usually in this game, if not other games. And, you go back and you look at the play that put State in position to win the game. The fact that Will Hardy did not at least deflect the football is criminal because he was more or less playing center field on a high pop-up. You just had to get underneath the ball and make a play on it. Ball should have been intercepted. Okay? You don't intercept it, you at least deflect it. He does neither. It falls right into Noah Rogers' bread basket. He makes a sensational catch, and it puts State in position to win the game. And that's been the theme for Carolina in this game, is that you've been in position 3 of the last 4 years to make a play or two to win the ball game. And you haven't, A, been either good enough, or B, you haven't been tough enough to make the play. And that's a hard pill to swallow. Because I think there's no denying Carolina is more gifted. They've got more talent, but they don't play better than NC State. Our talent doesn't show up in the way that State's talent shows up in this ball game, and that was true for the defensive side of the football in that second half. And it was really disappointing because Omarion Hampton did everything possible to win the game. He was the best player on either side of the field Saturday night, and he made as many plays as he possibly could to get one last victory in a Tar Heel uniform, and he got let down by a defense that could not make a simple play on a ball being asked to be either intercepted or deflected.
Well, I mean, yeah, he was just fantastic. 263 yards of total offense, 2 touchdowns, finishes the regular season with 1,660 rushing yards, which is exactly 60 off the pace of Don McCauley's single-season record. He was outstanding. But here's the problem. You couldn't even celebrate his touchdown that put the team in the lead, because I said it while we were sitting there. He scored too early because you just knew it. You knew this defense was not going to be able to come up with a stop. They hadn't done it the entire second half. And you're right, man. The thing that killed this team, again, and we talked about it early in the year, and we knew it from game one. We knew, maybe not game one, but I think especially that Charlotte game, we knew this secondary was not good. We knew this group was going to have a lot of issues throughout the year. And even the guys that you trusted the most, Marcus Allen and Elijah Huzzie, really Huzzie more than even Allen, there were moments they got picked on. But it was, again, a safety group that we heard so much about in the preseason about how they were going to be better than a year ago. They had 4 different guys that they could rotate back there, and they were going to have success. I mean, look, man, it's not an easy play for Will Hardy on that one. You'd love for him to come up with a deflection. And at this point, honestly, I think part of it is just bad luck, because this is almost just similar to what we saw back in 2021 when State somehow scored 14 points in 26 seconds. Like, this is just what is happening to Carolina right now under Mack Brown in this rivalry. And hopefully that is leaving out the door with him. But, man, this secondary just got carved up. And when you needed them to make plays, they made plays in the first half. They didn't make them in the second half. And that's really what let Carolina down. But when you can't stop the run either, it's not going to help you. The defensive line got worn down by an offensive line that simply was not good. And that's a group that you're hoping maybe some of those guys stay, because you don't want a total loss down there. But you're hoping that a lot of it is the young guys, and that maybe you can dig deep with a new coaching staff and find some of that talent that's in there for these guys, because it seemed like when Carolina needed it, it disappeared. 2 other things that I think were important here, and I'd like to hear, which one you think was probably more impactful. You could go with the special team struggles, which, again, another thing that we've seen so often with Mack Brown during his tenure. Noah Burnett misses an extra point, misses a field goal. Here's the thing about that. You could say, well, if you add that up, that's just 4 extra points. Would not have allowed Carolina to win the game. Doesn't matter. If Carolina goes into halftime up 10-7, the game has a much different feel, especially with Carolina starting the second half with the ball. The other thing in the first half that hurt Carolina was the offense, especially in that first quarter. First 4 drives of the game for Carolina, they had just 26 yards of total offense, and they turned the ball over on their own 11-yard line, leading to State's touchdown. So I think both of those were very impactful, but which one did you think was more impactful when it came down to the final result in this game?
I would probably say it was your special teams issues, just because they impacted the way that the rest of the game was played and what dictated certain situations and certain outcomes. You can look at the slow start for Carolina offensively and want to point to that, but rivalry game, and we've seen that in years past where it takes Carolina a half to get going. Even in games that they've won, it's been more of a second half effort that Carolina's offense was dominant against the Wolfpack. They still put up enough points in the second half and did enough to give Carolina a chance to win the game. But if you're winning at halftime, you just don't know how differently that game looks in the second half. Noah Burnett did a lot of nice things for Carolina a year ago. Clear regression from him. And it showed up in the biggest game of the year. And it sucks that we were not able to overcome it. But I would say that special teams played a bigger role, because that's an area where in a rivalry game you have to win. And if not, it usually costs you. And Carolina did not win in that category, and no surprise they lost the game.
Yeah, I mean, both of them, I think, incredibly impactful, because you can make the argument that, yes, if Carolina goes into half with a lead, they could have had success. Could have been done, too, if Carolina doesn't turn the ball over on their own 11-yard line. The way the defense played in that first half, there's a chance that State doesn't score that entire first half, and it's a shutout. I would go, though, with the special teams because you shut a team out in the first half earlier in the season, and you still got beat. It's the game that I talked about, that Duke game. It really felt like the special teams because that sort of altered how Carolina had to play because they knew they did not have a kicker that they could rely on. I mean, hell, they attempted another field goal. He almost missed that one. He had to bank it in. And look, this is just part of what it is with college kickers, man. There's some that you can get that are consistent their entire career and are one of the best in college football. You know where those guys end up? They're guys that last in the NFL for years. It is incredibly difficult to find those types of kickers. And so, there's really nothing you can do. I mean, it's really hard to even blame Noah that much. It's part of what happens. And we knew it. We were pointing that out down the stretch of the year that he was starting to miss some field goals. We were getting a little worried about him and that we needed Lucas Osada to be ready. Carolina never turned to him, but I do think that was very impactful in this game. Really quickly, last thing that I wanted to take away from this game in specific was the play of Jacoby Criswell, because I think we talked about last week when we were recapping his performance and people were saying, look, this is where, we're seeing that he's clearly not the guy. We're going to have to take a look in the transfer portal or if Bryce Baker ends up sticking with his commitment, maybe that's our guy. I thought this performance was pretty uneven from him. And honestly, I think probably pushed me more to the thought of going into the transfer portal. I know there is this thought from multiple Tar Heel fans, and I saw it again tonight with the news that Connor Harrell is entering the transfer portal, one of the 5 guys that we'll talk about here in just a little bit. People are looking at Max Johnson and saying, oh, well, first of all, guys, there is absolutely no guarantee that he's going to be on this roster. He came here to play for Mack Brown. That's the reason that he came to Carolina in specific. That's why it was such a quick turnaround when he entered the portal last year. So banking on that really isn't that smart. I think they're probably going to have to go into the portal to get a guy. And I think after the performance that we saw on Saturday, it's probably the smart thing to do. Does that mean that Criswell shouldn't be given a chance to win the job? No, not by any means. But I do think that he showed you the other day that he is not guaranteed to be a success here at Carolina.
You at least got to go bring someone in to compete with them. Unless this new staff, looks at Michael Merdinger when they're preparing for the bowl game and really like what they see from him, and they're confident he could be the guy to push Criswell for competition. I don't think that's going to be the case. There's going to be a lot of quarterback talent in the portal. Carolina will be an attractive landing spot, you would imagine, depending on who they make the higher head coach, what that offense is going to look like. And so you go bring someone in here that can push Jacoby and challenge Jacoby. And that should have been the case regardless. Even if Carolina would have won the other night, I would have still said, hey, if you can add to that position, you can upgrade over Jacoby Criswell, go do that. As much as I like Jacoby and I thought he wasn't to blame for the majority of the year, his struggles down the stretch did play a factor in Carolina finishing 6-6 and not 8-4. So, I would expect the new staff to be aggressive. And I do think they will at least add a quarterback to push him going into the 2025 season.
Yeah, I think really the first thing that you got to figure out is you got to figure out who your coach is, because I know a lot of people are becoming enticed with the thought of bringing in the Tulane transfer quarterback, Mensah. I forget his first name. I think it might be Nate. But I mean, look, and there's a chance, Darian Mensah. There's a chance that could end up if John Summerall is the pick, then yeah, there's a chance that could definitely be the direction that Carolina goes in. But here's the thing. What if it's Glenn Schumann, the defensive coordinator from Georgia? Then what are you doing? Are you bringing in a former Georgia quarterback? We've seen how some of those guys that have transferred have ended up working out. It hasn't necessarily been great. So I do think Carolina's got to be open. I mean, look, there's some pretty good guys out there. Connor Wigman entered the transfer portal, former 5-star from Texas A&M, a guy that came into the season as a possible first-round NFL draft pick, type talent in a lot of people's minds. Now, I'm not saying that's exactly what he is, but maybe if Carolina, especially if they go with an offensive mind, maybe there's someone that feels like they can sort of bring him under their wing and fix some of the issues that he had leading to his benching this year. You've got a guy out of Arizona, Noah Fifta, a guy who was the Pac-12 Freshman of the Year a year ago. This year regressed a little bit, certainly wasn't as great, but was under a new coach, maybe reuniting with a good offensive mind like he had when Jedd Fisch was there could help him. That's another guy that I think Carolina, if they're going that route, should certainly take a look at. And maybe even Miller Moss. I know he wasn't great at USC, but could be another guy where change of pace, leaving a conference like the Big Ten, going to the ACC, maybe it could help them. So I think there are options that Carolina has to consider. And also, I mean, if they keep Bryce Baker, I mean, he could be in the conversation as well. And I do think that is certainly on the table. And we'll mention him here a little bit later on. But I do think that Carolina's got some options, and they're going to have to look at all of them, because I just don't think Criswell did enough for you to say, okay, this is our guy moving forward. There's not really a better quarterback that we can get, especially to fit into our system. And with a new coach, I mean, it opens all sorts of possibilities. All right, now let's talk about what happened after the game, after the fight. It's the press conference with Mack Brown. So Mack Brown goes in, talks for about 15 minutes, and then heads out. When I say he talked. No questions were asked. Mack Brown left and rolled off into the sunset, potentially, into retirement. Who knows if that's what ends up happening? There are some people that want Mack Brown to potentially coach elsewhere in the state at some of the smaller jobs. But Mack Brown with some odd comments. There were a couple of different moments that I think stuck out in particular. First of all, he says that he did not like how everything went down. Not shocking. He said that he was offered to resign on Monday, told them that he wasn't going to go that route. Bubba Cunningham then told him, you have a chance to resign on Friday. Mack Brown said, I'm not doing that either. I'm not resigning the day before a game. And so Bubba Cunningham said, we have no choice. We have to go ahead and fire you. Mack Brown says that he understands that Carolina is looking for a football coach. Meanwhile, he is looking to save lives. Don't know what that means. Don't know if Mack is potentially becoming an EMT. I'm not sure what exactly is going on there. But one of the odder press conferences that you're going to see, and somewhat reminiscent of kind of what we heard from Larry Fedora in his final season on the way out, where the comments just kind of left you scratching your head. So first of all, what do you make of the comments that we heard from Mack Brown in the post game? And do you think that he has a right to be angry about how everything was handled by Bubba Cunningham?
Yeah, he has a right to be upset. Him resigning before the game wouldn't have done anything for the positive. I think Carolina still gets beat. Probably a better chance they come out flat, and this thing's not even competitive. So I understood not wanting that to be made public until after the game. And if he was willing to announce it on Saturday night or first thing on Sunday morning, I don't get why our athletic administration was not willing to let that be the case. But on the flip side, when he's publicly talking about, I'll be back next year, you did kind of force the hand. I think the biggest issue is Bubba Cunningham firing this school's most beloved football coach 5,000 miles away while he's at Maui. And some of that he can't help. He's at a pretty big event for Carolina basketball. But when you're firing a figure as universally beloved as Mack Brown, he deserved the respect of it being done face-to-face and in person. But that's not the way that Bubba chose to do it. And it's very evident that him and Mack Brown are not on good terms because Mack would not call him by his first name. He referred to him simply as Athletic Director Cunningham, and made it known that had he been able to go out the way he wanted to go out, would have probably still worked at the university in some capacity, an ambassador role. There's no one better to be an ambassador for North Carolina football than Mack Brown. He is the program. But he made it known very clearly that's not the case. Now we get to the concerning part, which is when he point blank said, and I still can't believe he said this. This administration is interested in hiring a football coach. I'm interested in saving lives. There comes a point in every coach's life where their ego is made known. And to me, that was the most egotistical thing I may have ever heard. The most self-absorbed thing I may have ever heard. And let's not get it twisted. Football coaches are arguably the most self-absorbed human beings on the face of the earth.
You should be a football coach then.
In the grand scheme of things, what Mack Brown does for a living does not matter. Does not matter. The world would go on without a beat without football. And to compare it to saving lives is as irresponsible a thing you could say. And because you're not saving lives. Point blank period. That's just factual evidence. And so I don't know if he was just trying to get a shot in and, get one last punch in before he left. There was a better way to do it as opposed to comparing coaching a sport to saving lives. So, in that regard, hopefully the next head coach doesn't think that highly of himself coming in here because that's going to be problematic. But it's
not coming in. It's usually going out because apparently we have a man that's saving lives. We've had another football coach that said if football was to not exist, then this country would fall apart, according to multiple war generals. It's unbelievable. I'd like to think that maybe he was hinting at his next job, which is that he's going to be some sort of EMT or something like that. I have no idea what was going on there. Greg Ward says saving lives. What a joke. Okay. I thought he said it was a joke. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. And then you have this bit of information. Now we have hit up David Glenn, who runs the North Carolina Sports Network. I am attempting to get him on tomorrow because he says, and I will read the quote, I will read the tweet off to you guys as it says. It says, and I quote, according to reliable sources close to the UNC Board of Trustees, the timeline and facts surrounding Mack Brown's firing Saturday night after the loss to NC State were incomplete at best. Talks had been ongoing for some time between Brown's representatives and UNC Athletics regarding the head coach's departure at the end of the season, and all parties were believed to have been in agreement until a change of direction from the Hall of Fame coach last week. That reversal mindset escalated as soon as Bubba Cunningham departed for Maui, where representatives pushed the narrative that Brown would indeed come back to the Tar Heel sidelines in 2025. Upon landing in Hawaii, UNC Athletics leadership was blindsided by the statements that Brown made at his weekly press conference, which, as you guys know, is on Monday. This was the prelude to the call between Cunningham and Brown that resulted in his firing. Another source shared that the situation at UNC in 2024 was similar to the coach's uneasy departure from Texas in 2013 and even his 1997 exit from UNC. That's where I'll end it right there. So basically, there was apparently an agreement that was in place, and Mack Brown, and now people believe that there are members of the Board of Trustees, particularly John Pryor, that they believe were involved with Mack Brown, talking to him on the side and telling him that he would, in fact, stay in place at Carolina. Now, we're going to try again to talk a little bit more with David Glenn. He's going to be able to tell us what he is hearing directly from his source. But what do you make of even that message, which at that point, I mean, look, I think all of us are being pretty hard on Bubba and the way that he went about it. If there is truth to that, I mean, I don't know. I don't think that means that Bubba is completely off the hot seat for how he handled this, but it would make a little bit more sense why he was out there in Maui and ended up having to basically fire Mack Brown from there, as opposed to saying, I'm going to stay behind and do this in person with Mack Brown.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely a conversation that Mack Brown forced Bubba Cunningham's hand. I also think on the other side, when he's being asked, what is he supposed to say? And some of it, how much of it was damage control for trying to salvage what little bit of a recruiting class he still had left at that point, with signing day at that time, a week and a half around the corner. Maybe just doing it for his coaching staff so they can maybe at least know that they'll have a job and be employed through the Christmas holiday. I don't know.
Well, they were going to be employed anyways, because you see right now they're keeping Freddie Kitchens. He's the interim coach. And so everybody but Mack Brown is staying on. To me, it's a if this is true, this is a really bad look for Mack Brown. It's a horrible look for Pryor as well, especially because he then comes out and says that the move by Bubba Cunningham was, quote, shameful. I mean, if there was something agreed upon, and I mean, I didn't get to go through the Carolina Insider Pod. That's something I definitely want to do and listen to what Bubba had to say about everything that went down. It has just been crazy here these last 2 days with all the portal entries, everything like that. From what I've seen, there have been multiple people that have said that after the James Madison game, that was really the point of no return for Mack Brown. And that at that point, Bubba started having conversations with him, basically saying, you're retiring at the end of the year, right? And for the most part, it seemed like Mack Brown was on board with that. I think what happened was all of a sudden you see consecutive wins. Oh, now it's a 3-game winning streak. And then you're thinking in your mind, Mack Brown, okay, maybe I still got something here. Maybe I am connecting with these kids. And then you have the performance against Boston College, where I think at that point, he probably should have realized, okay, I don't have the connection in the locker room that I thought I have. And I think Bubba probably thought, okay, he's going to realize that as well. We still are sticking to the plan. And yeah, I think Mack had sort of turned in the direction that I'm going to come back. I'm going to give this one more run. And maybe that agreement that they thought they had agreed to, each side was kind of heading in a little bit of a different direction.
Yeah, I mean, that's probably ultimately what happened. After the James Madison game, I think, and this is coming from as publicly as big a supporter of Mack Brown as you're going to find in myself. When you hear your head coach offer to quit, it's not a good look. Mm-hmm. Whether he was using it as a motivating factor or not. And so I do think that agreement was also what was in place. Also, what does it say about Bubba that Mack Brown, who is as connected as anybody in the college football world, is getting phone calls from agents being told, just so you know, FYI, they're looking for your next head coach. they're looking for your replacement. How's Mack Brown supposed to do his job at the highest level? Even if he knows that he's going to retire at the end of the year, the fact that, Carolina was already doing their search and being that active about trying to find his replacement to the point where he's having to field phone calls isn't fair to him. What this does in the long run is add a lot of pressure on Bubba Cunningham to get this hire right. This will be his most important hire he makes as Carolina's AD.
Right.
I would argue that top to bottom, when you include revenue, non-revenue sports, men's and women's sports, Olympic sports, Carolina top to bottom has the best athletic department in the country. With their success in all the other sports that they still currently field because they're in the ACC and they don't want to give up those sports until they absolutely have to. Not many ADs get to make 3 hires at one school, whether it's for football or basketball, but that's what Bubba Cunningham's going to get to do. And I do think that the Larry Fedora hire, for all intents and purposes, he got right. The decision to bring back Mack Brown, for all intents and purposes, he got right. But now you've got to find the guy that's going to elevate the program above a level that he got this program to, which is not going to be easy because you can win at Carolina, but it's a unique set of challenges that you got to have the right coach to overcome the obstacles that exist for Carolina to be what we want to be as a football program. And so I think that's what all this has done with the way that this was handled from the beginning to the end is it has added pressure to Bubba Cunningham to make sure he gets this right, because no matter what, he fired a person that A, the fan base for the majority loves and adores, and B, the university as a whole loves and adores Mack Brown. And it's not going to be easy for the board of trustees and these other guys to build a new relationship with the new football coach because they'll always compare him to Mack. And so if this new hire flops, it'll be the end of Bubba Cunningham. And I think he understands that, and I think it's why he's going to do and exhaust every avenue to make sure he makes the best hire possible.
That's if he's allowed to make the hire, because the board of trustees is trying to push certain names for this job. So Dick Morgan says, any insight on the new coach? So this is what we can tell you. Here's the deal, Dick. There's not a whole lot of concrete stuff right now. It seems like there is legitimate buzz and interest around John Sumrall, the head coach currently at Tulane. Guy that's a defensive mind. He's had a ton of success at Tulane in his first year. Just the FBS level as a whole, down at the Group of 5 level, he is 32-6 as a head coach. Prior to that, he was the defensive coordinator at Kentucky. So he spent time in the SEC. He knows what it's like to be in a pressure-packed conference. Thing is, he's never been a Power 4 head coach. So there is some risk that comes with that. The other guy that I think a lot of people are really wanting and pushing for on the fan side of things is Glenn Schumann, the defensive coordinator from Georgia, guy that was part of Nick Saban's staffs for a long time, then went when Kirby Smart became the head coach at Georgia and became a member of his staff as the defensive coordinator. Eventually, when he got there, originally he was, coaching linebackers, and I think coached safeties as well. He spent time as a position coach. He's been everywhere. When he was back at Alabama, he was even in the front office. So he's done a lot of different roles, which I think is very, very helpful for someone who would then become a head coach. The thing you notice about both of those guys, defensive-minded guys. So it seems like that's certainly two guys that are getting a lot of buzz. I think Carolina probably is interested in both of them. Arthur Smith came out earlier in the week, last week, and said that he had apparently received a call from Carolina expressing interest, and that he, at this time didn't really seem to have much interest in the job. Now, he didn't officially turn down the job, which means that, one, he wasn't offered it, and two, there's still a possibility that if he is offered the job, he could take it. That one, to me, honestly, does nothing. I don't really think there's much there. I don't think that he's a guy that you look at. I mean, one of the guys that I proposed in the 15 coaches that I think Carolina could entertain and should entertain. I did put Arthur Smith in there, but he was pretty far down the line. He was under the guys that I put attainable, but with risk. And even attainable at this point might be a little bit of a stretch. One of the guys I put under home run hire is Ben Johnson. The reason I put Ben Johnson in there and why I think he's different, because you'd say he's an NFL guy. Man, Ben Johnson has an innovative offense. It is one of the best in the NFL right now. Arthur Smith runs an old school ground and pound type offense. I don't know how sexy that is for college kids to play in. You could say, well, look at Jim Harbaugh. Yeah, the Big Ten, that can work. At the ACC level, I don't really think that's working. And I also don't know if Arthur Smith really has what it takes to be a guy that goes on the recruiting trail, that handles all the NIL stuff that you have to deal with. The only benefit is that his family, of course, is connected to FedEx. That would be a huge NIL fund that could pour in. But from my perspective, I have absolutely no interest in that. I'm assuming we've talked about it. Same thing, you've got no interest in that either.
Yeah, no. First off, FedEx has a lot of NIL backings within the Memphis programs. So would they want to double up in NIL support two programs? That remains to be seen.
Yeah, well, they're not. They are not poor. They have plenty of money. They are one of the most successful packaging operations out there. But I mean, I don't know. That's the thing. How much money are you even getting? And does that matter if you have a coach that has never coached at this level and is a guy that, honestly, we don't really know if his scheme fits college?
Yeah. You look at Summerall. Look, there's no denying that what he's done in the last 3 years is highly impressive. It's at the group of five level. And this morning I made the comment that I'm supposed to look to Tulane to be my next head coach. I know when I said it that Mack Brown had ties to Tulane when he came to Carolina the first time, but the program was in two different spots then. Like when he was brought in, Carolina wasn't trying to elevate itself into a national contender in the 12-team playoff era. It was a program that was trying just to become relevant again in the ACC. And you look at the Georgia defensive coordinator, we complained all the time about a lack of accountability from Mack Brown. And you want to hire a guy whose boss doesn't hold his players accountable off the field for all their driving incidents? Pass. So Carolina's got their work cut out for them to really find this great candidate to be the next head football coach, because I think right now, I don't think they have gotten the amount of interest that I think they expected to get upon the job coming open. And look, everybody in college football will tell you it's a great job. Pete Thamel, Greg McElroy, you name it. They'll sit there and talk for a minute and a half about how great of a job this is. Well, if that's the case, there better be better candidates that come to the fold outside of the Tulane head coach and the Georgia defensive coordinator.
I mean, at that point, I think you may just be overestimating the job. I mean, I don't, to me, like, who would be a good candidate to you? I don't think, I mean, any of the names I've named off have been shot down immediately. I just, like, I'm going to tell you right now, Jimbo Fisher is not coming to Carolina. He's going to be West Virginia's next head coach. Urban Meyer is a guy that I mean, I don't think that's on the table. I mean, in all honesty, I just, to me, I don't think they're going to make a hire that's going to impress you, because I think that you believe that Mack Brown is still the right guy for this program. And that's fine. I mean, I think that there are people that believe that is true. But I mean, to me, I don't think that's the case. I think that, a guy like Matt Campbell, much better coach than Mack Brown is right now. And that one would, to me, that would make some sense why it's taking a little bit of time, because Matt Campbell is getting ready to coach for a Big 12 title. There's a good chance that he can win that Big 12 title. That'd be more than Mack Brown did at Carolina his second time around. PJ Fleck, I think, would be a tremendous coach at Carolina. I think, people are afraid of, he's got a weird cult-like culture. That's called football culture. There are a lot of guys that if they don't like the head coach, they will come out and tell you that, it's like a cult. It's like this. Yeah, it's called playing for your head coach. And he's also a guy that's been through a lot. You know the story of PJ Fleck. You know kind of why he ticks the way that he does. And if you don't, I would encourage you to go read about what happened with him family-wise. There's a reason why things at times might seem like they might be a little bit off, and why Row the Boat and some of that kind of stuff came about. I think those are probably the coaches that you would look at and say that Carolina maybe has some sort of chance to take away from these other schools. Because Kirk Cignetti, I don't think is a realistic one. I know people brought that up. I put that on the list as a home run guy, with the argument being you're in the Big Ten. I don't think that's honestly going to happen. But those would be the guys that I think maybe some of these people like Josh Pate, like Greg McElroy, that could be who maybe they're talking about as the high-end guys. But, I mean, even a guy like John Summerall, that's a better hire than Larry Fedora was. Like, especially if he finds a way to win the AAC title, that means that he would have won a Sun Belt title and an AAC title in consecutive seasons. I think that's much more accomplished than a guy like Larry was, coming in, having won a conference title at Southern Miss, but it was really 1 year that he was that successful there.
No, you're not wrong. And look, no, there are names out there that can be impressive. We just haven't heard those names, and maybe that's because this thing is taking a little bit longer than they anticipated. Maybe it's because they are working on Matt Campbell, a guy that is coaching for a conference championship this weekend. My only pushback is Matt Campbell showed no interest in leaving Iowa State for Oklahoma. Oklahoma's 10 times a better job than North Carolina. Why would he leave Iowa State for UNC?
Could have been timing. The other thing I would counter with for Oklahoma is that's a hard job, man. That's a job where the expectations there are so high that, I mean, we've talked every year since Brent Venables has been hired. We have talked about, will they fire him? Should they fire him? Oklahoma fans really don't like him. So that would be the only thing that I could counter. Also, remember at the time when he was offered that job, it was an interconference move. I don't know if that could have possibly weighed in, but the other thing I guess that you could counter with also is he turned down NFL jobs. So this is a guy that, I mean, those are better jobs. Now, the thing is he could also be a guy that just likes college, doesn't think that the NFL really translates. I don't know how he would translate in the NFL, to be honest. I don't think he's really like gimmicky and coach speaky. He doesn't seem like Matt Rule. But, I mean, the NFL, especially some of certain jobs, are incredibly difficult.
Yeah. So, like, that would be a name. If that name emerges, that's a quality. You have a chance at hiring a guy that could elevate you past Mack Brown.
I think I'd be ecstatic. That would be my number one guy. I have him ahead of Fleck. I think he's done a tremendous job in the middle of corn country where you can't recruit.
Yeah. And then same thing with PJ Fleck. He's made Minnesota football relevant for the first time since Lou Holtz was there in the late 70s. And that's a program that won a lot of national titles in the 1930s. You know that with him, there will be a level of toughness and accountability that would resonate with us as fans.
Yep.
And there would be an identifiable culture change because everywhere that man has gone, he has been able to cultivate a winning culture. So, again, if those two names emerge, I would be rather impressed if Carolina could land one of those with one of those two names. And I think you have a shot at elevating Carolina past where Mack Brown had them. And I think it's important to put this into perspective. You look at the last 2 years. So Drake May's 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
They were 9-1 and 6-0. We can talk all we want about how bad the finishes were. Can't run from that. But at 9-1 and 6-0 in the 12-team playoff, North Carolina is a team we're talking about as an at-large bid for the playoff. That's factual evidence. That's where Mack Brown had the program if the playoff had expanded before this season. And so you got to find a guy that can build the program to a point that has them in 12-team playoff discussion. Because in Mack Brown's two of his final 3 years, had Carolina in that conversation. Hell, if you go back to the COVID year, they would have been in the conversation as well for that 12-team playoff too. So 3 of his 6 years in the 12-team playoff, Mack Brown had North Carolina football, a program that has not won a conference title since 1980 in the playoff discussion. You've got to find someone that can do the same thing. It's not going to be easy.
Yeah. I mean, look, part of that is taking risks on guys. You talked about, Mack Brown being hired out at Tulane. Maybe that is some role. I think there is potential for him. There's no question about it. You don't win the way that you're winning at that level and we just pass it off as completely nothing. But in terms of home run type hire, I don't know if that fits that. That's why I would classify that guy, him, Schumann. There's a couple other names that have popped up as guys that would be splashes. It would generate a little buzz. There'd be interest for sure because these are guys that have potential, but it's not the home run hire. You hire Matt Campbell, you hire PJ Fleck, I think to myself, especially because you look at what those guys are doing with lesser recruiting classes. In Matt Campbell's case, it's not easy to attract transfers because, man, they ain't paying into the collective at Iowa State. It's just not happening. Minnesota, Fleck's done a little bit of a better job there. I think those are guys that if you give them fertile recruiting grounds, the way that they can develop players, yeah, they're to me, I think those are guys that would be home runs. I want that. I just don't know if that's the direction that Carolina goes. Now, real quick, last thing on the coaching search. How about this? An idea that was apparently brought up by multiple people on the board of trustees. Apparently, multiple members have brought up an NFL legendary head coach, Bill Belichick. Would that possibly interest you in any form or fashion?
No.
How could you? I can't believe that people actually suggested this with a straight face. Now, this is a report that came from somebody that was apparently is very, very locked in on Inside Carolina's message board. Then it was shared on social media yesterday in a tweet by Taylor Vipolis, sort of giving it a little bit more legs. Very interesting to have a guy that works for Inside Carolina, that does stuff for them, tweet that out, which kind of makes me wonder if there is a little bit of truth to that. My thing would be, so your solution to a guy that was too old and is losing touch with college players is to go out and hire a guy that's not even a full year younger than Mack Brown and has never coached at the college level, and you think he's going to come in here and win. Are you crazy? Are you stupid? This is why the board of trustees should have zero say in what goes on. Let Bubba Cunningham make the hire. And I hope these board of trustees are looking right at me. I'm looking right at the camera. Do not mess this up. I don't give a damn that you guys came up with Butch Davis back in 2007 as the guy that Carolina should possibly hire. You got one right there. But guess what? If you hire Bill Belichick, we might as well shut down the football program. That would make no sense at all. Makes sense for one of my teams, the New York Giants. That makes more sense. But Carolina? Who are these morons on the board of trustees that are making these suggestions? Because I'm going to tell you right now, you should not be watching college football because you clearly have no idea what the hell you're talking about. Oh, okay.
I just have nothing to follow up with. So
You're not even giving it any credence. Probably smart. All right, so let's move on to the transfer portal stuff really quick. 5 guys enter the portal. No one overly significant. It started yesterday with offensive tackle Eli Sutton, guy that played in 4 games in 4 years. He ends up moving on for his final year of eligibility. Then you get to today. 4 guys have entered the portal today. 2 running backs. You had Jordan Louis, who played in just 1 game at Carolina. Depth guy. Now, he was a redshirt freshman, so potentially down the line could have seen more playing time. Caleb Hood, this one, I think some people were shocked by it, but he was a Mac Brown guy through and through. Mac recruited his dad, Errol. He was a guy that I think if Mac Brown stays, he probably stays too, and probably would have had a little bit of a role in the backfield next year. We know the story with him, man. Injuries just destroyed his career at Carolina, unfortunately. So he's now in the portal. You had Zach Greenberg, transfer from last year along the offensive line. We saw him in 2 games this year. He had to come in, play the majority of the game against Charlotte, then had to start the game against NC Central at center when Austin Blasky went down. Graded out incredibly well. Was arguably the best offensive lineman in both of those games for Carolina. That one kind of hurts a little bit, especially with Willie Lampkin leaving at the end of the season. I think that is certainly notable because you would have liked maybe for a guy like him to compete at that right guard spot. But he enters the portal once again for his final year of eligibility. And then you've got Connor Harrell, who enters with 2 years of eligibility. He, of course, started 2 games for Carolina this year, the Charlotte and NC Central games. Very, very bumpy this year after showing some potential in his other lone start that he had in his career in the bowl game against West Virginia last season. So you see this group of 5. I don't think there's anybody here that's really shocking. I would say the most impactful ones, though, I think Greenberg, because you thought he could once again at least be a depth guy for you next year, maybe rotate in. And then it's not even the players. It's the fact that 2 guys have already left your running back room with the possibility that Amarian Hampton could go to the NFL. And we don't know about what Darwin Barlow's situation is going to be if he's going to get another year of eligibility from the NCAA. So those are probably the most significant takeaways from what we've seen here in the first 2 days of transfer portal action for Carolina.
Yeah, nothing too consequential. You knew that this is going to happen. There's going to be more to come. And this roster is going to flip. And you're hoping that's a good thing. You're hoping you get better players, better talent, better depth with the new staff that will eventually be hired and will be tasked with adding talent via the transfer portal. So, this was going to happen regardless of Mac Brown's departure. I do think for certain guys, it'll be the biggest domino as to why they're going to enter the portal. But nonetheless, there's not one that I look at and say that really puts Carolina in a bad spot going into the offseason. So hopefully, the core of this team that is expected to be back next year will be back and will give this new head football coach a chance to be competitive his first year on the job.
And the thing is that I don't know if we're going to see anybody super significant. There might be, a guy or 2 that, really was attached to Mac Brown, doesn't want to hear out a new coach. A lot of these guys are going to take their time. They're going to see who the new coach is, and when that decision is made, then they will determine whether or not they fit the system that he wants to bring in, whether or not they mesh well with the new coaches, from their time being recruited maybe by some of these guys. That's what you kind of got to wait on. But yeah, and the only thing I'm worried about is what this running back room could look like. That's why I think at some point you got to get a new coach in here, because the sooner you get someone in, the sooner you can make sure you take care of a guy like Davian Gallas for the future. That's the thing that you want to do, no question about it. Last thing I'll mention on the way out, 4-star quarterback prospect Bryce Baker revealed today he will not be making his decision during the early signing window. So he's going to push that decision off. He will not sign the letter of intent, and it will be between three schools. It will be Carolina, Penn State, and LSU. I think the fact that he's pushing this decision back kind of shows you already that there is motivation for him to stay in state. There is motivation for him to play at Carolina. He wants to see what hire Carolina makes, and if it's one that he feels like he fits and can play for. If he does, then he's probably going to stay on, and Carolina will have a 4-star quarterback that is currently ranked inside of the top 100 overall prospects, according to 24/7 Sports composite player rankings. He's the number 8 quarterback in the class. He was a guy that went to the Elite 11, was highly regarded there, played very well out there. He is an elite quarterback and could be the future of this program. But Carolina has to be wary that Penn State's still going to be pushing, LSU's still going to be pushing. So they got to make sure that they make the right hire, and that hire, one of the first things that he does is talk to Bryce Baker. Maybe if he can, get him on campus and show him everything that he needs to be shown to keep him as a part of Carolina's 2025 class. Of course, any information on that, we will have you covered. Same thing with more on the transfer portal. All the articles are up there, guys. Every single guy that entered the transfer portal today, there is a specific article on each and every one of them that breaks down what they did at Carolina and the impact of them leaving their rooms. So make sure that you check that out on the website, HeelToughBlog.com. Also going up tomorrow at some point. This time I'm actually going to make sure I get this one up. Sarah Sanders says, I can see us playing ECU in the Military Bowl. That could be a possibility. I'm going to lay out all the possibilities that Carolina has here as we sit following the final week of the regular season. Now, of course, these will change because you will have the conference championship games. You still have Army-Navy that then has to be played after that. So there's going to be a lot of moving parts here. Now, Army-Navy, I don't think will really affect anything, especially the ACC teams. There are 82 bowl teams. It lines up perfectly, and I don't think that Army and Navy, those are typically bowls that are agreed upon beforehand. You'll probably see after Saturday they will actually agree to bowl games. So that shouldn't really affect it. So we'll tell you after Saturday's conference championship games what it's looking like, and then eventually you will have the college football playoff selection show that will take place, and then of course we will have the official bowl projections or the official bowl designation, and when we get that, we will let you know where Carolina will be playing their bowl game. Meanwhile, anything going on with the coaching search, that'll also be on the website. There is so much stuff to keep an eye on right now on HeelToughBlog.com. So anytime that you feel like, hey, I need to check on the latest news that's going on with Tar Heel football, same thing with Tar Heel basketball, make sure you go to HeelToughBlog.com because we have every story that you need around this off season for Carolina football and the current season that's going on for Carolina basketball. That also reminds me, make sure that you guys check out the preview edition of the podcast, the Four Corners podcast, that is, for tomorrow night's game against the Alabama Crimson Tide. We will have you covered on all fronts, everything Alabama. Josh will have a preview and recap on the website for you guys of that game. The preview will be up tomorrow for you guys to take a look at. And then, of course, the recap will be up for you guys on Thursday morning. So all of that stuff. And then we will, of course, have the podcast that you guys will be able to listen to as well. That's the Four Corners podcast, wherever you get your podcast, same place where you can get the Heel Tough Blog podcast. If you're a listener to both podcasts, make sure that you are subscribed so that you don't miss any episodes throughout the off season for Carolina football, still remainder of the season, I guess, with the bowl game coming up, and the remainder of the basketball season. So that wraps it up for this edition of the podcast tonight. I want to thank Josh for hosting with me. I want to thank you guys for watching and listening. And as always, go Tar Heels.